Hello there, I'm Jimmy Vegas, and this is how to make a survival horror game in Unity, and welcome to episode 2. So between the last episode and this episode, I have saved this scene, which I should have covered at the end of the last episode, and I apologise, but all you really need to do is go to File, and either click Save Scenes or Save Scene As, and you'll be presented with basically this to say, save your scene. I've just saved my scene as Scene 001 for now. So this episode, what we're going to look at is importing things into Unity. We'll look at some textures, materials, normal maps, and all the effects they can have on the game objects in your world, especially when it involves lighting. So what we'll do first off is we will create a new folder in our Assets window. So on Assets, right-click, Create, Folder. And we'll call this folder Textures. What we'll also do is we will create another folder. So create folder, and we'll call this one Objects. So for now, we have two folders, one to import all the textures we're going to use in this tutorial, and another one to include the objects. So I'll explain a couple of things of how you can import into Unity. The easiest way is just to drag and drop from folders. So let's firstly go into our textures folder. And I'm going to drag and drop these two textures, which you can get on the website, which is in the description of this video. Head to the Downloads and Assets section, Survival Horror, and go to episode 2, and you can download everything we use in this tutorial. So if you select both of these objects and drag them into Unity and then drop them here, they'll import straight into Unity. Now it's also worth noting that you can't import from a compressed file. So if you've downloaded something with textures in, it's a zip file, you would have to extract them before you bring them in to Unity. So these files basically, there are other things you can bring in as well. You can actually import folders. So if we go into our object folder and we import this mushroom folder, the entire folder then imports as well. So it's still drag and drop. I got an error in the console there, but that's nothing to worry about. We just click clear if you get that same error. We'll deal with this mushroom in just a bit. So firstly, let's go to our textures folder. Now, in Unity, textures don't actually belong on objects. Materials belong on objects. And the way that works is you can either create the material yourself, or you can actually let Unity create it. So if we, for example, drag and drop this rock 001 texture onto this game object, same way we imported it, drag and drop, you can see that texture is now on here, but you'll notice this folder has also been created called materials. This is Unity creating the material itself. Now if we go to that materials folder, click on a material called rock 001, you can see it's only basic. Only basic things have been brought into this material. So let's make this rock look a little more realistic rather than such a flat surface. So if we click on our textures folder again, on rock 001, we're going to create something called a normal map. Now a normal map gives a bit more depth and visuality to the object it's attached to, but you can't just attach any normal map to any object. It doesn't quite work like that. So to do that, hold Control, press D, and what that does is duplicate whatever you have selected. You can see it's now called rock 002, but I'm going to change that by pressing F2, rename it to rock 001 underscore N. So it kind of stays the same. So we know these two are connected. If we have this rock 001 N selected, over here in the inspector panel, you can see an option called texture type. By default, that's what it is. So if we click that list and go down to normal map, you'll see you get an extra option called Create from Grayscale. I'm not going to go into that just now, and we're just going to click Apply. Not too much is going to happen because we need to apply that normal map to our material. So if we go on the Material folder, click our Rock 001, you can see there is a little option here for normal map. So what we need to do is drag and drop that normal map into this little space here, and you should hopefully see that this now changes how the object looks. And you can see instantly that it, especially if you've got the scene set up the way I have, it looks very different on different sides. This is all down to lighting. This is where lighting has a dramatic effect on the object's textures and materials. So I'm going to click on the spotlight and disable it. I'm going to go on the point light and disable it. And I'm going to go on directional light and rotate it back down to about there. Now the rock looks a little more realistic, but there's another way we can deal with a normal map. If we click it again and click on Create from Grayscale, you'll see you get a little bar here to change the bumpiness and the filtering. But if we click Apply straight away, we can see that it dramatically changes how that looks. It gives it a bit more shiny and, well, it looks slightly more realistic if we change the bumpiness down to about there. So we can see the kind of effect it's having. So it gives it a wet, glossy kind of look if that's what you're going for. But once again, the light also affects how this looks. So if we take our directional light and rotate it again, you can see that it has an impact at every stage of how the light looks. So we can change this again, change the filtering to smooth and click Apply. You won't notice too much of a difference, but in game, when you're dealing a lot with normal maps, you probably would notice a difference. I would recommend having it as sharp, so as it gives a clear, crisp image at all times. And I'm going to keep this bumpiness as about 0.68. I think that's fairly decent for now. So let's go back to our materials folder and click on Rock 001. We also have the option of changing the metallic and smoothness, and once again, this also has an impact on your lighting. So for example, if we change the metallic look all the way up to 1, you can see this rock now looks quite, well, a lot more realistic than it has done. But then that's also affected by the smoothness. So I would recommend playing around with the metallic look and the smoothness and change it in relation to what your light looks like. So if we put our spotlight back on and put our point light back on and change our directional light all the way off to about there, again you can see what impact it has on the material. So if we change our smoothness, you can see having it that smooth isn't going to work if you end up with a dark atmosphere, and having it like that gives it a kind of a cave look with the atmosphere of the light. So play around with these settings and get it exactly how you think it should look. So another way to create a material rather than let Unity do it yourself is right click, create, and then all the way down here you have material, and then you could create your own material this way. For beginners I would let Unity create it yourself, but as I say, you end up with the same results pretty much. So I'm going to call this wall 001, and the idea is we drag this wall 001 into the albedo square just here. So drag and drop. And you won't see anything different in the scene. That's because we don't have this applied to anything. But let's create another normal map for this. So hold Control and press D on wall 001. Let's press F2 and rename it to wall 001 underscore N. And let's put it into our scene and let's see what it looks like. So I'm going to use this game object we have already in our scene, the cube. And what I'm going to do is hold Control, press D again to duplicate. And I'm going to hold Control and I'm going to pull it on the blue, which is the Z. Now the reason it does this is because that's called snapping. If we were not to hold Control, it would just move freely like so. And if we go to Edit, go to Snap Settings, we can see in what intervals our snap settings would be. So we'd move it in stages of 0.5 at the moment. If you wanted to move it in stages of 1, just change X, Y, and Z to 1. As long as you always hold Control, you'll be able to see the snap settings work just fine. So we'll change this wall 001N now to a normal map. We'll create from grayscale, we'll keep it sharp, and we'll have the same as what we had with our rock. We'll have 0.68. 0.068 that should be. And apply. Now let's add that to our material for the wall. So click on wall, textures, and drag and drop into normal map. And now let's drag and drop that material onto this object. And I'm going to rotate this by 90 degrees to make it look more like a wall rather than bricks on the floor. So let's select our object and let's rotate on the X by 90 degrees. In fact, we'll do it by -90. So it gives the same result. So hold Control again, and let's bring this object closer in. And let's bring it upwards. So now we can see, but what I might do is I'm going to change this floor to 4x4, I think. Change the wall to 4x4 as well, just so as it gives us even numbers rather than odd numbers. And let's bring it down into position. And a little bit closer. How's that looking? So at the moment I'm just playing around with how it looks and seeing what I can come up with using the light. And you can see already with the wall itself, it does look vastly different when it comes to the lighting, because it is very contrasting. So let's set it as 90 again. Let's just move it inwards so we can see it there. Okay, so at the moment the objects are kind of crossed, but we'll get into that at a later date because there is so much to do. Let's have it as -90. Okay, I think I'm happy with that. So now it's a case of how you want the wall to look in relation to the floor in this case. So let's see. Let's play around with our wall material. So we could change the metallic look to give it a darker, intense look, and again with the smoothness, depend on what you want. So we could have the smoothness about there and slightly less metallic. Okay, so I'm quite happy with how this is looking now. It's looking very eerie, I would say. So I'm going to take this cube now and let's do something. Let's change the properties of the material to make it wider. So let's say we want this floor to be, let's say 10 by 0.5. So 10 by 10 on the X and Z, but we want to duplicate it. We don't want it to be one single texture. If we go on to our Rock 001 texture, down here we can use the tiling. So if we change this to, let's say, 2 by 2, we can see that it's created 4 iterations of our texture. What I might do is just change the direction of light so as we can illuminate the scene a little more. There we go. So we can see it a little bit better now. So it's kind of given us a biggish space to work with. So if we take the cube, and we can also do that in the inspector panel if you do have the cube selected by clicking this little option here, and you can change this to perhaps 10 by 10, and you can see it's kind of given that tiling effect, but having it this much kind of gives kind of looking into oblivion kind of feel, but you shouldn't really do that. So let's have 2 by 2. Same with the wall. We can have the wall extended, so let's change the wall scale to, let's have it long ways. Let's have it 10 by 5. So what we want to do is change the tiling to be 2 by 1, because we want, if we were to do it 2 by 2, it would give the stretch look, and I don't particularly want that, but you can have that if you want. But playing with the tiling gives a different impact on the texture itself. So let's pull that out to about there. Let's change our floor back to 0.5. And I'm going to pull the wall upwards to about there and bring it in. So you can see already we're kind of building ourselves maybe a cell, maybe a kind of a room. I'm just going to play around with the rotation for now and see what kind of things we can come up with. I might rotate that by 180 just to make it appear slightly different. Now, the great thing about Unity is, especially at a beginner level, it doesn't necessarily mean that things are difficult. So we could build a room just by using the basic objects that Unity gives us. We don't really need to use a modeling program at this point, although in later development it is wise to use a tool to develop assets. But at this stage, we're going to build a room just using the game objects that we've been given. So if we take this cube here, let's right click, rename, and let's call this floor 001. Let's take this second cube, which is our wall, F2, and call it wall 001. And on wall 001, let's hold control, press D. Keep hold of control, bring it outwards, and let's rotate on the Z. And let's change it to 270. And now let's bring this wall in. And let's bring it across so it lines up quite nicely with the texture that we already have. Just a case of lining it up nicely. So bring it in, bring it across. There we go. So one thing that we can probably note at this point is the room itself is nicely coming together on the inside, but the outside is a little bit messy. Now, the idea of how a survival horror game works, i.e., for example, if we look at Resident Evil, the game is contained inside the playable area, and a lot of games are like this. In the playable area, everything looks hunky-dory, it looks fine, but on the outside of the playable area, it can look a little bit messy. I wouldn't worry about trying to maintain the outside area, because when you're deep in development, the outside area doesn't matter too much. So let's take this wall here, hold control, press D, and let's bring it to the other side. And I'm going to rotate to 0 on the Z. And that looks okay. I'm happy with that. And I'm going to take this wall, hold control, press D, bring it all the way over here to about there. And should we rotate? Yeah, we'll rotate. Let's have that as 90. So you can see now the room is come together quite nicely, and the lighting does have an effect. So we're going to stick with the directional light for now, and let's get rid of the sphere, the point light, and the spotlight, and take our directional light and just rotate it to about there maybe. Or do you think we should go with a point light? So you guys can probably choose whatever you want at this point. As I say, it's all about the lighting. You should probably find out what is the best lighting. If you want to trial and error things, there's a neat little trick that you can do is, if you have directional light in there, for example, you can click on the type and change it to spot, or directional, or point. So you can play around with the settings if you need to. So I quite like how that looks. I'm going to give a bit more of a yellowy tint. And intensity, no, we'll keep the intensity as 1, but we'll keep the range as about 70. So you can see if you double click, it kind of really zooms out because it has to show you the entirety of the game itself, or rather the area of where the light is being exposed to. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to deal with that mushroom, just to have a little bit of extra added bonus to this little room we have. So if we go to our objects folder, go to mushroom, and we have this little object here called mushroom. This is something called an object. Sometimes it can be called a prefab. A prefab is basically a collection of objects or items or anything that is brought together inside the asset window down here. So if we drag and drop this mushroom into our scene, we should be able to see it's quite large. So we need to kind of refine it a little. So if we change it to 0.01, 0.01, 0.01, and let's bring it center, 000, and double click. We can focus in on a mushroom and we can place it. So firstly, what we'll need to do is bring it up and rotate it on the X. So we'll rotate it to 90 or minus 90, depending on which way it's facing. So we can put it on the floor, bring it over here, put it in the corner, and then let's add the texture to it. So if we go on the mushroom here, click the arrow, click on cylinder 01 as it's made in a cylinder within Blender. Click here, and then we just need to drag and drop the albedo, which is this, onto there. Change the color of it to white. And as we did with the others, we can hold control, press D, change that. So I'm going to keep it as GRIB1, but we can change that to a normal map. Grayscale, have 0.068, click apply. And then we can just drag and drop that onto our normal map. And then change the metallicness and the smoothness to make it how you would want it to look. So once again, the lighting also has an impact. I think I might want to rotate just a little bit. So I might rotate it on the X. There we go. So I'm going to put it against this wall, slightly rotated on the X. So it's kind of growing out the wall a little bit. It's just a little attention to detail that matters. So we'll leave that there for now. Next episode, we're going to bring in a player. So we'll start off with a first-person player. If you have a model for a third-person player, we can deal with that as well if we get time. But we'll start with a first-person player because it's the easiest thing to do. And we'll go from there and we'll build up this room. We'll build up a story. We'll build up multiple different things going from the next episode. Until then, guys, thank you very much for watching.